Hi, Guy.
Hello, Gary. Big one today.
Well, a big catalogue. I mean, Sparks have... I think we were just wondering how many albums has it been? 24, 20...
6. I think it might be 26. I seem to think they say something about 25 albums in there because they did that ridiculous thing, didn't they, where they played every album at a gig and they did a series of gigs
in Islington.
Yes, that poor band.
They did a different. In fact, I would ask them about this. Surely they did a different one of their albums in chronological order every single night. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
How can you learn that stuff?
Well, there was an interview with the drummer in the film, and he says the things you spend a week learning an album, and then you've got it, and then the next week you learn the next album, but then you've lost the one before.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it is some catalogue, and of course there are sort of great moments in this catalogue. You know, I mean, Kimono My House.
Come on.
You know, was one of those.
So we all so remember that. You know, that was such a massive. You know, and they were I think they've got that sort of the same thing as Hendrix, where kind of we think they're ours.
Yeah, of course. Well, I noticed on the latest album, he says the word Q and not line. I mean, they're so Anglophile in that, but they were. I mean, they spent a lot of time in the UK during the glam rock period and were embraced by the UK in a way that their home country didn't embrace.
That's right, yeah.
But the other key moment we'll have to talk about, of course, is number one song in heaven.
Of course.
And the Giorgio Moroder moment.
And actually, it's only now going back and looking in retrospect and realising, actually, that was way more key and important and ahead of the curve than we perhaps thought at the time.
Well, no, I hate to say I was at the Blitz Club again and how important that scene was.
That's fair enough.
But Rusty Egan played that song the Blitz Club, and everybody just went, this is it. This band, it influenced us when we wrote our first album, when I was writing the first album and we were recording it. It was, why did I buy a synthesizer? I mean, Sparks were one of the reasons.
Yeah. And there's also, we don't want to do too much, because it seems they have all these pivotal points that keep happening. There's actually only one real fallow period, which is from like 1990 to 94. And then they're back again with a big one, When Do I Get to Sing My Way, which is such a brilliant statement.
Yeah. Yeah. And, they're embraced by so many bands, everything from The Killers and Franz Ferdinand and Duran Duran and, of course, us and... Depeche Mode. I mean, but also their foray into making films as well. We'll have to talk about that. Annette, which is a fabulous film, I must say. I loved it. But again, this goes back to they were going to do a film with Jacques Tati originally. Yes, of course, because they grew up wanting to be filmmakers.
That's right.
And their story is so touching with their father. We'll get onto that, who died young, who took them to the movies. Guy... This is also the first time we're going to be interviewing two people at once.
I know. I'm very afraid.
I am, because this town ain't big enough for the both of us.
Da 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 da.
And it ain't me who's going to leave. Let's get them on.
Welcome to the Rockonteurs.
Okay, guys, I'm ready.
That's a big tune for sure. I actually wrote that originally for Tina Turner.
Of course, I had gone and found Joni Mitchell down in Florida and brought her back.
I've listened to a few of them and they've been really good, man. I've been sitting in the back of the car coming into London. They're brilliant.
That caused a big problem in the band, actually. I was having too much fun.
Thank you guys for still being around, still making music, still being into it, and doing this podcast. It's fabulous.
Well, I get the feeling that us three should go for a pint. That's what I think.
I'm in a band now. It's called Roxy Music.
You know this thing about the 10,000 hours of experience?
Oh, yeah,
get good at something. When we recorded Arnold Lane, we'd done about 50 hours.
The Rockonteurs podcast with Gary Kemp and Guy Pratt.
Keep on rocking!
We've got Russell.
Oh, hi, hello. Russell.
Hello, Russell.
Hi there.
Oh, so good to see you.
Thank you. Yeah, good to meet and see you as well, you guys.
Yeah, where's your brother? Is he
He's coming soon. He's in his own room somewhere in this hotel. So
here comes Ron. Here comes Ron. Ron.
Yay, Ron.
Yeah, how you doing?
Russell and Ron. This is fantastic. Are you both in different rooms at the same hotel?
What a question.
No, because that's how we used to do the podcast when we were on tour. So it's quite funny.
Things are going really well for Sparks. We can afford 2 separate rooms.
Finally. Brilliant.
Finally.
I mean, it's extraordinary. You know, your journey is unbelievable. How, you know, we look back over so many albums and the quality of all of them is phenomenal. I mean, this latest record, to me, sounds like you could have made it in 1970s. It's as good as anything you've ever done.
We really appreciate that. I mean, we feel an obligation to kind of push ourselves as far as we can go and not coast. And, you know, especially now because we're getting a lot of new fans and people that are kind of just joining now. They kind of think sometimes that we're a new band when they hear us. So you want to do something that isn't just a rehash of what you've done in the past.
Well, the fact that, I mean, even, you know, that girl's crying in her latte, that you've managed to maintain for so long this fantastically arch, ironic sort of style of lyric writing, which is, you've never lost that sort of edge to it, which is, you know, which is magnificent.
You know, we think that just, you know, having the consistency of the world that Sparks has kind of created, that universe that you can't kind of veer off course ever. I mean, we probably couldn't veer off course very well either, but we kind of take pride in that the, you know, the universe is kind of intact, and people that, you know, are attracted to Sparks kind of appreciate and know sort of what that universe is, and they like to know that there'll be a song like "The Girl's Crying in Her Latte."
But that doesn't make it any. It doesn't make it any easier to imagine. I mean, but you're right. That universe. I mean, you can trace a song like "Elevator." You know, you could trace that back to "Computer Girl." You know, dealing with inanimate objects that somehow are foxing you or making you fall in love. I mean, that's a great connection.
You're right. You know, in a certain way, you know, we try to push things as far as you can, but also there's a sensibility that we can't escape from, and you know, at this point we're proud of that sensibility, even if it means that there is an expectation that always is there for what we're doing.
I think that's a lot to do with why, because I'm wondering, because you're in the UK on tour at the moment, and I'm wondering if that feels like a sort of homecoming, because it was, you know, your original success came over here, and as I was saying to Gary earlier, it's kind of like Hendrix. We think of you as ours, and and a lot of that is because your lyrics there was something so, you know, when This Town Ain't Big Enough when you first broke here, the only person I would say who was doing anything sort of similar in terms of that arch ironic thing was Brian Ferry.
But even Guy, lyrically in the new album, you know, in a love story, you know, you sing Q instead of line.
Yeah, well, I guess it seeped in all of the our Anglophile-ness. No, and it was the UK that first really embraced Sparks in a big way. We had 2 albums out in the States before we transplanted here. The first one produced by Todd Rundgren and stuff, and you know, and then we got that offer from Island Records to come here, and so it really was the UK sensibility that kind of, you know, that found something really special in what we were doing in a bigger sort of way than we were able to achieve in the States. And so it's just been that, yeah. And when you mentioned about coming back here now for playing, it is like homecoming in a certain way. And just for us, it's even gotten more exciting because we're doing 2 nights at Royal Albert Hall, and for us, you know, being Anglophiles from way back, you know, Royal Albert Hall means something special, extra special, and knowing we get to play there this time, and things are kind of on this upswing now. It's really satisfying, and we owe a lot to Britain that's kind of really embraced the band.
I don't want to look back too soon, because I also want to sort of talk about this new album a little bit more, because having Cate Blanchett on the video, it was such a coup. I mean, what an incredible performance from her as well. How did that happen?
We were at the César Awards in Paris a year and a half ago. Those are sort of the equivalent of the BAFTA Awards or the Academy Awards in the States. We had been nominated for the film music and for the film that we wrote called Annette, that was starring Adam Driver and Marion Cotillard. And so we were there for the nomination, which we were lucky enough to win Best Music for that film. And before the show started, there was this little knock on our dressing room door, and this woman who looked an awful lot like Cate Blanchett was there, and she said, "Hello, I'm Cate Blanchett." And we said, "Oh my God, you look an awful lot like Cate Blanchett." And we kind of fell on the floor because, and then she introduced herself by saying that she's been a Sparks fan forever since she's been growing up. She was growing up in Australia and all of that. And we were just so amazed because we really love her as an actress, think she's just, an amazing actress. And for her to even know who Sparks is, let alone say she's a fan of the band, we were just like, oh my God. So anyway, we kept in touch with her, and it came time to do the video for Girls Crying in Her Latte. And we didn't really have a strong idea of how to represent that because we didn't want to do something that was completely literal. So I said, Cate Blanchett, let's contact her, and surely she'll save the day.
So you'd swap numbers.
Oh yeah, for sure. We gave her the song, and she said, "I love this song." She said, "It's something I don't know. When I listen to it, I don't know whether I'm supposed to laugh or I'm supposed to cry when I hear it. But I love it." And that was a really nice reaction too, we thought. And so we said, "Just do anything you want to do in the video." She could just stand there and stare at the camera, and it would have been enough for us. But she concocted that whole dance routine that's in it all on her own, and that's how she wanted to represent herself in the song, and wearing her headphones and her thick glasses and all that sort of thing, and
the great suit.
More pleased.
Could I just actually, because you were talking about Annette there, which I just want to say is a brilliant film, and in fact, "We love each other so much" has become a catchphrase around our house between me and my missus. So that, but nice. Also that opening number. We should start is probably the most Sparks thing I've ever seen. Yeah. It sums you up so well.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that was it was a really great experience. We had tried forever to get a movie musical off the ground, and it's just it's difficult. And finally, all the pieces fit together, and we had met up with this really great French director, Léos Carax, and he was a fan of the band, it turned out, and we had given him this project that we had completed called Annette, that we thought was maybe going to be Sparks' new album at that time, that we would have just a narrative story. And then he, after listening to it, he said, "I'd really like to direct this as my next film." And so we were happily surprised that he suggested that, and then so it couldn't have been better, the whole whole situation.
And that's third time lucky, isn't it? Because you've certainly been. I mean, just because there's been 2 film projects before, haven't there? Yeah. But the very fact that somewhere in your CV you can actually have the name Jacques Tati is beyond any level of incredible.
No, obviously we were distraught when that project didn't actually happen. We had met with Jacques Tati, the great French, I guess you would call him comedy, but it's a very strange kind of comedy. But
it's existential observation, isn't it? Yeah.
No, exactly. And so to meet with him was just such an exhilarating experience. Obviously disappointing that didn't happen. It was in the middle 70s. It was a film that was to be called Confusion, and just for a variety of reasons it didn't happen. And then in the early 90s we had another hopeful movie project that Tim Burton was supposed to direct called Mai the Psychic Girl, based on a Japanese manga. And we worked on that for about 4 years, but there's all these reasons. Sometimes you can't even pinpoint where it went wrong, but it just didn't happen. So for this time to actually have a movie musical made, and a really uncompromising one. It was just
and a stellar cast. I mean,
no, I mean that was to hear, just to kind of be, in the opening scene you mentioned. I mean, we're not exactly co-stars in the film, but to have like even a cameo with Adam Driver and Marion Cotillard is like kind of, wish fulfilled, a lifetime wish fulfilled.
I love that song. We love each other so much, and what I think I enjoy about it is how the repetitiveness of that phrase somehow turns the phrase on its head. It becomes kind of meaningless or darker as you repeat it and repeat it. It's a trick you use in quite a few of your songs, isn't it?
Yeah. Reichian. Wow, you guys use big words. But sometimes, you can take a really banal expression, like even "My baby's taking me home" in a song, that could be just something you kind of pass through. But when a phrase is repeated and then altering the musical setting that it's in, it becomes kind of this, the meaning kind of changes and becomes something else. And so even though a lot of our songs are really wordy, we also like to use the opposite approach and be completely kind of minimal as far as.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting about you finally ending up making a movie is that you sort of started that way. Your inspiration was the movies. I mean, This Town Ain't Big Enough for the Both of Us, was exactly, kids growing up with plenty of Westerns. And it's really touching when in Edgar's documentary, I found it very moving, the story of your upbringing. This dad, who I have to say was one of the coolest dressers I've ever seen.
Tell me about it.
Oh my God. I mean, way ahead of the curve. I mean,
that's right.
He would be an icon in Japan right now, right? Wearing those clothes. And him taking you to see movies, you two brothers, and then he dying so young, and you gathering around your mum. And it seems to me that your bond as brothers, which is so incredible, came out of that moment of your dad leaving so early and all of what he'd given you before he left.
No, it's really true. And, I think just not anything so specific, but just being in an environment where there's somebody doing something creative and in the arts. And even though he split his time between doing commercial artwork for a newspaper, but then the other half of the time he was a really great painter, a fine artist. And so I think maybe just growing up in that sort of environment, something must have seeped into our bones and, steered us in the right direction, even though he wasn't doing kind of musical endeavors, even though he brought home tons of cool records for us to listen to. So that was also
that's what I wanted to add to what Gary was saying, which is the other thing that's fabulous is we have so many people who say where there was this site they saw Elvis on the Ed Sullivan Show, the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, and that was it. That changed everything. Everything's outside. They rebelled or whatever. But you guys had all this fabulous music and everything being brought to you by your parents. It was all coming from them. And your mum drove you to Vegas to see the Beatles. I mean,
That's right. No, across the Mojave Desert, if you had seen the car, it logically shouldn't have made it all the way across the desert, but somehow we got there. And it was the second time she took us to see the Beatles. She also took us to the Hollywood Bowl when they played, so we seen them twice. So,
but that's what's so nice is like so your entire musical career, everything comes from a place of nurturing. It's all being nurtured from them.
And our musical education isn't in some kind of formal context. It's from listening to, AM radio and then records and all. So people kind of think of our music as being eclectic at times, and that I don't know where that actually comes from, but because our original learning experience with music, not learning in a formal sense, but kind of just being indoctrinated was just rock music on the radio and records.
I have 4 boys, Ron, and I can see the sort of how when a younger sibling comes along, the older one gets his nose put out a bit, and some of them never forgive the younger sibling for coming along. But you made an incredible connection with, I think your kid brother's like 3 years younger than you, right?
Yeah.
Was there a moment, do you remember, Ron, when it was like, well, I guess he's in my life and we're going to create
only
together?
when it was a business partnership, then we had to get along, So you never kind of consider those things until you realize that you're actually working with a brother. And we're fortunate enough within Sparks that our roles are so different from each other within the band that we don't have the usual competitions that other bands with brothers might have.
It's probably worth pointing out at this point, sorry to interrupt, Gary, but is that Gary is like you in one of the rare successful brother partnerships.
No, right. No.
In rock and roll. It's like you, the Kemps and you two, you're like the anti-Gallaghers or the anti-Davises.
No, because it really is the exception, because I can understand that sort of situation, but we have a bond in that way.
We love each other so
much. Can I say I anally put my albums in alphabetical order, and Spandau Ballet sit right up close to Sparks.
Every time I go to Japan and look through the Tower Records bin and look for selfishly for one of our albums, there I go, Spandau Ballet. So.
Yeah, but of course, but with your ridiculous output, you obviously dwarf the section that Gary takes up.
But he's ahead of us. So.
You talk about your relationship together, and of course, famously, I think what made it so extraordinary at the beginning was this. It was perfect. We knew this story. Your relationship was a story so familiar to us. Here was Tigger and here was Eeyore, right? That's how I think we saw you as kids. Was this something listen, I don't want to blow the myth anywhere, but was it a natural thing for you to find those relationships? Or was this something you got from a movie?
You mean
what
is seen on stage?
Yeah,
how we appear?
I mean, obviously, sort of Ron as the sort of sort of silent movie kind of, not villain, but
yeah. Well, I mean, it may not sound like it, but it was pretty uncalculated. The whole. I mean, I just did whatever I thought was, trying to be cool, like every frontman probably tries to be, and then Ron kind of went the opposite way, where being a keyboard player, it was hard to jump around and be cool with a keyboard. And so he got his hair chopped off. Actually, when we moved to the UK after a little while, he had long bushy hair like I did, but he got rid of it and slicked it back and went kind of the opposite route. But it wasn't like we had a board meeting and said, hey, this is cool. You'll be that kind of way and I'll be this kind of way. He just did it. And then it was really something that was so effective and striking on British TV, because their, close-ups were the thing. And so when they did close-ups of Ron, that was
unforgettable.
His, natural inclination to scowl.
It's that side eye to camera. That's the absolute. That's your definitive. That's your windmill.
Exactly. Because I always wanted to be Pete Townsend, but
I saw you did that event with the violin, didn't you?
Oh yeah, no, that's right.
That's
but that
right.
was a one-off. But I really wanted to be Pete Townsend forever. But as a keyboard player,
we all do.
Well, okay, yeah, but within the context of our original band, everybody looked like a rock person in a general way, and I kind of wasn't carrying my load, and so I just had to go a different direction. So, I mean, it was frustrating because, I just loved the flashy bands all the time, but in a really kind of bizarre way, just having close-ups where in a way you're doing something quite a bit less physical than a windmill, it kind of worked at that time.
And I also think some of your success being in the UK was because we understood humor in music. The Beatles always had it. There were always, their influence would have been the Goons and other, on a review, that was normal to have serious acts and comedy acts. That your embrace of satirical stuff was so British.
That was something that we felt very early on. Before we moved to London, we had 2 albums out, and we played quite a bit at the Whiskey Go-Go in Los Angeles for really small, very, very small audiences. And we would always play with bands that were, thought that any kind of humor in music or any kind of visual sense was something that was lessening of kind of musical integrity.
They were all Laurel Canyon self-reflective, I guess.
No, exactly. And so it was difficult because there was that feeling. And so we did, I think, people ask sometimes how come it happened in the UK, but that is one thing, I think, that the acceptance of both humor in a song, but not humor that's only humor, but that kind of can have an underlayer of serious tone to it as well, and then also visuals, both in the sense of what you're doing on stage, and then album jackets and videos, all those sorts of things. It doesn't, to us, it's kind of all one thing.
Yeah, as Vince Clarke points out in the movie, so that is that if everyone's honest, you guys were the model for everyone. For everyone, the moody keyboard player, that became everyone. That was Yazoo, that was Pet Shop Boys, that was
Yeah.
No comment.
But Russell, I think you can hear a lot of the chanteur right from the start in your voice. There's the French singer, there's Europeanness about what you were doing right from the beginning. Where were you getting that, or was that just me? Is that just me noticing that?
French New Wave cinema.
It's probably
French New Wave cinema.
Yeah, well, it's a combination of all that, I suppose. One thing was just the way Ron wrote songs that kind of dictated the style, a lot of the actual singing. It just coming up with a melody like way back then. This Town Big Enough for Both of Us. It's not a traditional melody, and he wrote it on a keyboard, and it was in that key, and we didn't think of anything like, well, you can transpose something down. We didn't even know that existed, transposition, at that time. So he wrote it in that key. You obviously have to sing it in that key, and so it was that kind of singing, but to that kind of song that wasn't really kind of a traditional pop melody or song, structure even. And so a lot of the style of what I do, I think, was dictated by that, plus the fact that, we always gravitated towards bands that were kind of had some visual style and their live presentation. So I think combination of that with the style of the music just sort of shaped my
talking of that. So you were saying how you like bands with the visual style, which is why you would have, you slotted right in when you came to England in the mid-70s. Who were you hanging with then? Who were the people you were kind of relating to over here musically?
We weren't hanging with many. I don't think we were hanging with anybody. That's why we were in our own little world. But we liked a lot of. We wish we could have hung with a lot of people. But we really like. You mentioned earlier, Roxy Music and stuff. We really love them. Love Brian for because there was some similarities in the aesthetic, not specifically musically, but just an aesthetic that was sort of coming from a similar area. So we, and plus, we loved all the, obviously the T-Rex and that ilk, a lot, and saw all those bands when they came to LA before we even moved here. So we were, seeing all of those bands when they were fresh off the boat, the first time Led Zeppelin had played in LA and Pink Floyd which you guys know, really early on. So we were kind of being sort of brainwashed by those bands that we really liked.
Yeah, because it's not really a coincidence, is it, that John Hewlett managed you at the beginning, and John was in John's Children, which was Mark Bolan's first band, right?
Exactly.
And they were an amazing group. They're a kind of missing link between mod and glam.
Yeah, and we love that. We love Smashed Blocks. So it was like when John had been introduced to us, we go, oh my God, it's the guy from John's Children. It is John of John's Children. So we were living out our British fantasy.
But the very fact that you start, your first album was with Todd Rundgren, which kind of maybe did, but with the arc of time, it's just the coolest place to start anywhere, and there's a great credential which goes through everything. It's never not cool to have done an album with Todd Rundgren.
No, but nobody else wanted to do an album with us, so we sent out the demos before the first album to at least 20 different record companies or producers, and Todd was the only one that responded. So I think you're right. I mean, we kind of chose him because we thought he looked cool, and but just it turned out that the sensibilities really clicked in the studio.
And also we had made the demo that he with most of the songs that later became that first album we made, and he didn't want to change what we had done. He wanted to try to help us enhance it sonically, but as far as the actual way we sounded, he didn't want to tamper with that, because he thought we had a really great kind of naive spirit to what we were doing, and it wasn't one of the kind of producers that said, okay, now guys, we need to get the hit single. He didn't care about that. I mean, obviously he thought we should have had more commercial success anyway, just based on what we were doing, but he wasn't the type that wanted to mess with the aesthetic. He just wanted to help it out a little sonically from our reel-to-reel recorder that we had that had a lot of hiss on it.
While we're on producers, let's just compliment Muff Winwood, because, Muff was actually, he signed Spandau Ballet to CBS in the mid-'80s when we were leaving Chrysalis. And obviously Muff is Steve Winwood's brother and played in the Spencer Davis Group, of course. That song, I mean, that's how brave that song was, putting sound effects on, and, I'm talking about This Town Ain't Big Enough. It was you guys have given me two moments where I've heard a song in my life, and I can tell you the place I was and where I was and how it changed my life. Later on, we'll talk about number one song in heaven, but certainly that song, This Town Ain't Big Enough. I remember it coming out, and we'd gone on a school trip, and we were going outside of London, my whole year group, and that song had just come out, and it was endlessly played on the record deck that was there. Everybody was obsessed with that tune. It's so visual as well. Sorry, there are no questions in that. There's just I'm just spewing sparks fan.
But what you mentioned about Muff, and being a brave soul that really championed that song, because they could have picked another song off of that album that maybe had a chorus and a verse, more normal structure or something, but he wanted to go with that one, which was probably the most eccentric song on the album, but he really believed there was something to it. And, sometimes we would go, we were kind of even the ones being cautious, saying, ooh, that's a little bit risky, huh? And he was, no, got to go for it, guys, and
there's one little thing that's very much, I think, feel a bit skirted over in the film, which could have been seismic, which is how you didn't do Top of the Pops, the first Top of the Pops, because you didn't have work permits, right? Now, that could have been the end of it, right? That you make it money. If you were here, you were doing it up, you were doing all this stuff, you didn't have work permits, you could have been sent home right then. That this whole story could have died.
It was this little oversight that no one had checked on. By the way, and it was literally, we were at Top of the Pops getting ready to go on, and the producer, heard my twang, and "Oh, where are you from?" And said Los Angeles. He said, "Hang on a minute," and and we were ousted from the show that time, but no one had kind of even thought of that issue. And then fortunately we were later, for some odd reason, we got into the musicians union, the British Musicians Union, a little bit later on, a couple weeks later. They somehow allowed us in, and then they had us on Top of the Pops, and then
but too late to stop the Rubettes from going to #1 with Sugar Baby Love.
Yeah, damn it, I don't know.
Yeah,
but we've been in the British Musicians Union since 1974, and continue to be card holders. So we're probably longer members of the union than practically anybody, and that's British.
Did you have to do that, ridiculous thing in those days? We had to do it late in the 80s, where you had to pretend to re-record the track for Top of the Pops.
Yeah.
And then swap.
You take the guy out to the pub. They take him out to the pub while you're supposedly mixing, and then he comes back from the pub and he goes, "Wow, it sounds just like the record." and you slip him the record.
And in fact, actually, this talent big enough for both of us is a great example of that. The sheer impossibility of remaking that in an hour.
Well, yeah, it was sort of a bizarre, thing they had making you re-record your song. That, like you said, you spent hours and hours and hours doing it, and in 20 minutes, can you recreate what you've done? But
Visconti must have been a cool producer to work with, because obviously on the next album you used him. Obviously given his credentials with Bowie and T-Rex. He
was also a dream to work with, and he's one of the producers that's kind of got all of the bases covered, because he's an amazing musician himself, and then he's an incredible engineer, and then his taste in acts was right in line with our taste, so it was kind of this match made in heaven. And he's a good guy, so we still in contact with him.
And where did you record that? Was that in Soho at the studio he was always using at that Trident?
No, we recorded at his home.
Wow.
Yeah, a little tiny studio.
Yeah, we were fortunate enough to work with him 2 times after that. Once on an album we did of kind of re-recordings of some of ours called Plagiarism, where he did just brilliant orchestrations, and then also again we became really close with a French band starting in 1989, Les Rita Mitsuko, and by luck he was producing them, and the band wanted to collaborate, just on a couple of songs, so we got to work with him in three different times.
Wow, this French thing keeps seeping back in, doesn't it? It's
funny. No,
it's a sort of constant thread. And then funny, and also enormous in Germany, don't you? That's always been a really strong place for you as well, hasn't it?
Yeah. It was. Then we had that one song, "When Do I Get to Sing My Way," that just out of the blue, was like we were considered a brand new band again, but it was sort of 10 years after the whole This Town and Come On to My House period here in the UK. Then all of a sudden in Germany, there's a brand new band, Sparks, and we had that song. So it's kind of odd that situations happen a few times where something just clicks in one area of the world and it kind of slips under the radar in a lot of other places. And then, but because of what it is that we're doing and all that, people, they kind of think, oh, it's a brand new band,
Because I've got to say, because by the way, what a brilliant song that was. When Do I Get to Sing My Way? And it's such a great thing. Were you kind of thinking Sinatra and Vicious?
Well, they're both so iconic. Yeah, well, they're both. The one line is, "When do I get to sing my? When do I get to sing like
Sinatra?
What do I say? Sinatra, and then when do I get to sing my way? When do I get to sing like Sid Vicious sang? So it mentions both of them.
In your writing, there's a lot of that kind of stuff, though, isn't there? How do I get to Carnegie Hall? Practice boy. On the new album, seems like a very sad song about Veronica Lake. I can't quite get my finger on it. Almost that, I feel like I'm going to get Ron to explain that one to me. But also Mona Lisa. It seems that in this way of taking icons, but the failure of icons, that it's hard to reach what we really want to achieve, seems to be a running theme in many of your songs.
In the case of Veronica Lake on the new album, she was like probably the biggest actress for a very short amount of time during World War II. And she had just an iconic hairstyle, a peekaboo hairstyle that was copied by women all over the States. But the women in the States at that time had to go to work in factories. And so, it sounds comical in a certain sense, but it was tragic in another way where their hair was getting caught in the machines they were working on. And so the U.S. government appealed to Veronica Lake, who was so influential to all of these women, to kind of do her hair in a different way, which she did. And, to me, I loved Veronica Lake, even though she had a very short career. I think she was somebody really special as an actress, but she kind of lost her popularity. And, it's hard to know whether it was because of that or like, she was kind of self-destructive in some ways. But and also, you mentioned the Mona Lisa's packing, leaving late tonight. Just it's a situation where the Mona Lisa hanging in the Louvre has just become disillusioned with this world and wants to go to somewhere more ideal for her.
Well, I suppose it's hard to listen to your songs and not see something autobiographical in them. And there's a lot of your tunes where you feel that maybe you're the wrong guy, that somehow it's not, I wasn't meant to be here. We've had our share of frustration, so maybe that's channeled sometimes in the songs. I don't know. To me, it's kind of not very interesting, a successful love affair as much as one that's kind of has its dark side to it. We've got to move on to this track because I found it snuggled next to a Spandau Ballet track. Here is my orange vinyl. Beat the Clock.
Wow, nice.
Because this really was a huge influence on Spandau Ballet. I don't know if you know, but around that time, we were going to there was a famous club called the Blitz, and of course Rusty Egan is in your documentary.
Yeah.
And this track came out and went on. This was a very refined playlist that he was choosing from. This was some Bowie, Roxy, and then it was Kraftwerk and Iggy, but anything electronica coming out of Germany. This was life-changing. This was real pop music that was intelligent, that had a throb to it that we'd never heard before. It was one of the reasons that we bought a synthesizer. It was why the first Spandau Ballet album was made. This was so influential on all of us. And Duran say the same. We all say the same. We need to talk about it.
Yeah, that's amazing. No, that's amazing to hear, because stories like that we don't get to hear them often. But no, it's really cool, really cool. That's ironic because when that album was first made, the public was so way ahead of critics at that time, because critics kind of really slammed us in the British press, because it was like we had been in their mind a rock band, and now we're working with synthesizers and a disco producer, Giorgio Moroder, and so it was kind of at first seen as being blasphemous to the rock cause, but then 3 of the songs were really popular off of the album as singles, and then like you mentioned, there was that whole club scene going on and with that song as well, and so it was good proof that sometimes the public maybe knows more than some critics do about situations, So it was, and then now since that album's kind of been reassessed, and all of those critics are now long gone, but that album still remains, and then it's kind of been reassessed as to what it actually represents in a more positive way.
Bringing another one.
I have it here.
There it is.
What an album! Number One Song in Heaven is one of the great.
And the fact that collaboration came about through something which really could have blown up in your face, wasn't it? Which was basically an empty boast to a journalist.
A lie. Empty boast or a lie.
What happened? What happened?
Yeah, well, we some journalist had said, so what's your next album going to be? And we had in our own minds, we really wanted to try to work with Giorgio Moroder because we really loved I Feel Love with Donna Summer that he had done. So we did this interview with a German journalist, and she asked what we were up to. We said, oh yeah, we're going to be working with Giorgio Moroder. And we had no clue about how to get a hold of Giorgio Moroder. And she said, oh, really? He hadn't mentioned that to me because I'm really good friends with him. I'm like, oh, crap. So then we owned up. We said, well, we actually haven't yet contacted him, but we would like to work with him. And then she said, oh, of course I can introduce you to him. And she did. And then we got along really well with Giorgio. And he, and it was all new for him too, because he had never worked with a band before. He'd only worked with solo artists like Donna Summer, where he could help to really mold the artists, even though obviously Donna Summer is a great singer and all of that and has her thing, but he could help shape, the kind of the musical, backdrop for her. And so working with us, it was kind of an odd situation for him because we had this band sensibility and he was coming from this other kind of sensibility, but he really liked us too. So it was, everybody's kind of tiptoeing a little bit in the studio, not knowing what we were going to come up with. But I think everybody was really motivated to just try to do something really fresh.
And was it a learning curve for you, Ron, as far as synthesizers are concerned?
No, he everything that we learned, knew about synthesizers, it all comes from that one experience. I mean, I had played with an RMI piano, in the UK, but I knew nothing about how you got that sound like from I Feel Love. So, we first walked into a studio in LA that Giorgio had worked in before. And there were at that time, there were no portable synthesizers. It was all like just these banks of walls of red lights and all this sort of thing. And so Giorgio, that exposure to the knowledge that Giorgio had and the expertise in the electronic studio was all from him.
Did you find yourself going down that rabbit hole then, and getting into VCSOs and filters?
Well, I've never, even though I'm fascinated by the sound, but we've never been 100% purists as far as having vintage gear and all. I mean, I have a few museum pieces in my place, but we like to work as quickly as we can. And so if there's a plugin now that approximates something and used within the right kind of context, then we're kind of fine with that. We don't really have many pieces of hardware in the studio anymore.
Because I think some of the synth sounds on the new album sound very period and are fantastic, dirty sounds.
Yeah, most of it's coming just from sound libraries that we have that have now you can kind of have everything at your disposal in one laptop, have vintage synthesizers, but then have full orchestras too. So it's pretty amazing time.
How do you don't have to answer this question if you want it to remain a mystery, but I know Ron in the early days certainly was the key songwriter, but how do the songs evolve for you now as writers?
Well, really in like two different ways. One of them is just in a more traditional way where maybe I come up with a song. I have like a small setup in my place on a keyboard and singing in my style and or else on an acoustic guitar. But and then bringing it to Russell's studio. But the other way is kind of more of a collaboration within the studio where we just start with nothing and try to, figure out, just to take one sound or one kind of rhythm and figure out, can something be built around this that has some kind of song form? And, it's really helped, me especially just where I having more than one way of writing is really liberating. And I think it it leads to more variation within what an album can be for us.
I mean, the fact that you just said on an acoustic guitar was suddenly felt like, because Vince Clarke is the same. Vince writes everything on acoustic guitar. You know, but what's interesting for all of that is that one thing that's really clear from the film is that you've always actually been very much about a band, and you have this, you know, you're clearly very close with your musicians, and you generate fantastic loyalty from your musicians. So you very much are like a band structure, don't you? When you
I mean, we really like it. I mean, we also, you know, we like it. The group that we have, you know, is kind of younger guys that are, you know, they're all fans of the band, and come kind of without a lot of baggage from the past. Like they're really just, they don't even know a lot of the minutia from the past, which is great. They like what we do, and so it's kind of refreshing where it's not like session guys kind of in your band. It's more like it is like a band, you know, and in the best sense of that, and kind of they're really not jaded by all of the bad stuff that one can get jaded by in music.
We spoke earlier about your films, and of course we should also mention the Seduction of Ingmar Bergman, which you know took you into sort of a slightly different art form almost. But is musical theatre's got to be begging to see you make? You know, when are you going to make that musical? I mean, surely Annette could be a musical
on stage. You mean?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a possibility that could happen at some point, and we would love for that to happen. I mean, right now we're kind of more focused on, you know, doing musicals for movies. We have a new project that we finished called Excrucior. That's the film company that produced the Edgar Wright documentary asked if we had what we were up to, and so we told them, we have in fact another musical that we've been working on, and so we finished the screenplay and finished all the music for it, and so now we're just kind of going to the next step and seeing who's going to be involved as a director.
Amazing! You wrote the story. You guys wrote the story.
Yeah, and it's really different story, completely different story, but the sensibility of the whole thing is definitely from our sensibility, but without telling much of this, what the story is, they've billed it as an epic musical. So we'll leave it at that. Whatever that.
I mean, I hate to say it, but I would have thought a great director for a film for you would be Edgar.
Well, you know, who knows? We love Edgar, and we're like really good friends now. So we'll
I should by the way, I've got one link here because I did the music for the thing that made it for his TV series Spaced. I did all the score for that.
Amazing!
So I'm very biased.
No, I love that. I love that. Actually pretty recently, I'd seen all his films, but I recently saw that, and I thought it was great.
You also worked with George Henkin, right?
Yeah, George, you produced your documentary, directed our documentary, Soul Boys of the Western World. Yeah, she was wonderful. Lovely person.
She's great.
Yeah. Your work ethic is incredible. I mean, 20 odd albums, 25, 26, what is it? I don't know how many.
26 now.
26 albums. 26. Do you drive each other to that? Because is like Ron picking up the phone, come on, Russell, we've got to do something. Or are you constantly looking to create art? And it's unstoppable with you, whether it's the music or the visuals.
I mean, there's nothing really ever spoken. It's all just kind of, that's what we do. And, you know, we'd be kind of lost without having that to look forward to, I think, you know. So we, you know, fortunately we have this studio in my place, and we work most of the time, you know. So it's not a thing of kind of even having to motivate the other person, you know, because we're both pretty driven as far as wanting to just be producing something. You know, you feel kind of naked if you don't have something in the works and something kind of to look forward to. So that part of it's not so difficult.
And has there ever been a thought of doing something apart?
Well, from my standpoint, no, because I have my people don't have to know what you can't do, and so there are quite a few things that I can't do in a musical kind of way. So I'm kind of, this is kind of the only situation that I can be in a musical sense.
Do you hear that, Russell?
Yeah.
You got it right where you want him, Russell.
Well, on our intro for you guys, we were
a raise.
we mentioned that 20 shows you did or whatever, when you were doing a different album every night. We couldn't believe that there were musicians out there that could cope with that workload. How did that work?
Yeah, we don't suggest ever trying it. If you even have 21 albums ever as a band, we don't suggest it because it's a harrowing experience. We rehearsed for 4 months for that, and just the having to retain all of that material, it's not fun. But we're happy. We're happy we did it. But did
you rehearse them in order, in chronological order? Because so that means that for your first show, you're playing an album that was you learned 21 albums ago.
And then
and also by the time, if you start in chronological order for the rehearsals, by the time you get to the album number 15, you've already forgotten what you've done on album number 1. So it's like
we're talking about by album 3. You've forgotten what you did.
Exactly.
We would rehearse on our own. You try to erase the last night's show in your mind and just start rehearsing that particular show on your own in your hotel room before each night. And it also became some really weird sequencing where we played them in the sequence that they were on the album. So like for Kimono My House, the opening song of the set was This Town Ain't Big Enough for Both of Us, where it might not be in a normal show.
Yeah. And what about talking about rehearsals? Is that what you've been in at the moment? Have you been in rehearsals with the band? Or are you about to start?
We rehearsed in LA for a week before coming over here, and then actually this weekend we'll start to do the more the production rehearsals with lights and all of that kind of thing, but for a couple of days here, and then we start next week
at Glastonbury.
We will be at Glastonbury.
What stage are you on?
It's the Pyramid.
Oh, God, I forgot the name of it.
It's got to be.
I don't even know what it's called.
I mean, it's going to be phenomenal.
When did you start the running dance?
Well, I would have to say that dates back from the 80s, and I've tried to kind of ease that out of my repertoire, but my audience won't allow it. So
quite right.
And so also you're going to end up at the Hollywood Bowl, right?
Yeah.
Is that your first headline there?
Yeah.
This band is going somewhere, right? It's building.
Yeah, we're building. We're on the way up. Any new record labels, so check out this band. They're pretty hot. It's a real treat. It's the most iconic place you can play probably in Los Angeles, and since we're from LA, just to get to play there and headline at the Hollywood Bowl is like it's a dream sort of. So it's actually the last show to then we go to Japan after that, but it's after all of Europe and after North America, and it's the final show there. So it'll be a real treat.
Because funnily enough, talking about being Anglophiles, you actually broke America in a similar way to all the Brits in that second invasion in the 80s with K-Rock and Richard Blade.
Yeah. Richard he's still over there doing his first wave on Sirius XM.
Amazing.
Yeah. No, he's amazing. K-Rock was amazing, especially in the 80s. It was a whole ecosystem going on there.
Incredible. Listen, thank you so much, guys, for coming on.
It's really good.
It's really
good
a
speaking with
joy.
you both.
Thank you very much.
And an absolute joy for us. It's like a real box tick to talk to because it's lifelong fans. So
good luck with the tour. Good luck with the album.
Really
the album's amazing. And thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure speaking with you both.
All the best.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, and you know what? I've got a soft spot for Ron, I think.
Yeah, that was coming across.
It's just he did admit to finding my records in the record store.
That was That was brilliant.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're just...
Can we only interview people who start SP?
Specials and yeah. You know, it's their vitality, isn't it? You know, what we find, we get people on of all generations. You know, Ian Hunter, who was 84, you know, the vitality and the punk of that man. They're still making records. You know, I think Ron's 77 or something now. You know, still doing it, still sounding the most modern people out there.
But maintaining that fantastically arch.
Yeah.
You know, they haven't mellowed, you know.
Yeah. Thank you to our producer, Ben Jones, from Gimme Sugar, for recording this. And who else we have to thank, Guy?
Our listeners,
Our
Gary.
listeners.
Our listeners.
Especially those who have signed up for the extras that we are now putting out there as well.
Are we able to start doing the British Airways thing of we'd like to welcome you on board, especially...
I've never had that. Have you had an especially Guy Pratt?
No. Especially our sort of club members.
Oh, I see. All right.
And and of course, next week is going to be our first live show.
Yes. No, we're gonna be putting out as our podcast will be the recording from The Screen and the Green, which we did this week, and was thoroughly enjoyed. And you can get to actually hear it and download it as of next Sunday.
And it will be fantastic. And what's fantastic is the whole condition of this is it means that Gary is never ever allowed to mention it ever again.
Sex Pistols, Screen of the Green. I was there. All right. It's good night from me.
And good night from them.
Rockonteurs is produced by Gimme Sugar Productions for Warner Music Group UK.